Hello there! After watching that WoWcast, I started to get very excited for 11.2, but noticed one thing just wasn't mentioned. A crucial thing that we have been asking for 18 or so years. WoW needs Ethereals as a playable race. Recently, we have made a video about the 10 things Midnight needs and omitted this particular thing, but I believe it is time. Not only do we need it, I will tell you why that is the case and also how this can be realistically implemented based on previous released races or allied races. Let's see if we can convince Blizzard to give us something cool. Why should we get Ethereals as a race and not something else? Well, first of all is because they are cool AF. Ethereals are a being of pure energy and use specially arcane-infused cloth wrappings to withhold their soul, basically act as a vessel so they can physically manifest into reality. Why do they need to do that, Flame? You ask. Well, it's because this big ol' Void Lord munched their whole bodies, dear viewer, and their soul or energy avatar is all they have left. Unless they retcon this into some other reason, I guess. In any case, Dimensius is a character we are definitely going to interact with. It ties into Xal'atath, and as far as we know, Xal'atath was responsible for Karesh to be destroyed in the first place. Before we dive into that topic, we have the second reason to get Ethereals, and that's because you, dear viewer, don't want it. Let me explain. Ethereals are now older than the Warcraft universe has been when they got introduced, so it's suffice to say they are a core part of the game, tied into now the third or fourth expansion, depending on how you want to look at it. And them being added creates a precedent that you will care about. Let's say you are the kind of person that wants ogres as a race, or maybe the Pandaria Jinnu, or maybe Murlocs. Whichever the case, ever since new races were started to get added, they were always that, new. It was almost always a race that hasn't existed in the game, with the exception of 2 or 3. Outside Magar Orcs, Darkaren Dwarfs, and Zandalari, which they got a whole new model unlike what they were already portrayed as in the game, every other race, of which there are currently 9 of, were essentially newly created races never before seen in the game, with their culture at most speculated or implied. I bet you have maybe 5 other races you would want before Ethereals, but unless we have a Murloc expansion in between Midnight and Last Titan, you might be waiting for this for 5 to 10 more years before you can ever play a Murloc in World of Warcraft. Ethereals are a race in that, can we get these guys we've enjoyed for over a decade as a playable race in the game? Bucket. Opening up that bucket just makes it more likely we would get other races in the hopes that they can do it at an obviously way faster rate to be able to cover all of them by the time we have grandkids. Which, by the way, we already made a video on what we think the top 10 races that need to be added are, with a link to it in the description. The third reason, which is the more likely and plausible, is the fact that it makes sense. We are obviously traveling to their homeworld and addressing their existential threat that they battle for, not sure, over 1,000 years now? Lore nerds, am I right? So them siding with us makes sense. Certain factions, like the Consortium, has already been an ally of ours since the Burning Crusade, and we have cooperated with them for decades at this point. Their allegiance can be shady, and most of the time very opportunistic. We butted heads with their Nexus princes and princesses a bunch of times, and won every time. Lore-wise, it would make sense for them to see us as a veritable force against the incoming Void, especially if we save their homeworld or open ours officially to them. It also wouldn't be the first time we have approached a new race, helped with their struggle of survival, and got rewarded with them joining our ranks at the end of the respective campaign. So if we do get Ethereals, it would likely be in 11.2.7 or the pre-patch for Midnight. If there was ever a time to make them playable, it sure is now by the end of this year. The next best reason as to why is because with their Technomancer we can actually take the fight to the Void, likely in the second chapter of Midnight, since the first will take place, from what we know, in Quel'Thalas and Northrend, as confirmed by Metzen when he said these zones will be revamped for the next expansion. The fight against the Void is a very peculiar one, since the Void is a force not bound to reality. A less peculiar fight, need I remind you, was against the Burning Legion, which we addressed by shattering the veil that separated Azeroth from Argus with Illidan's demonic keystone. The name slips my mind. When we went to Argus, their war machine production homeworld. The same style of technology is needed to eventually fight the Void on their home turf. Now, whether we do that in Midnight or Blast Titan, it doesn't really matter, because my guess would be that we still need the Ethereals for it. Of course, as always, the WoW team can just decide that these guys will just be a renowned faction that story-wise gives us the tech and then fly off into the distance. And with this last point, I also went over how these could be introduced into the game, since we don't really know the story planned for 11.2.5 and 11.2.7. It's not clear when the best time to introduce them would be, but it would definitely be at the latest in the Midnight pre-patch. The reason this is the most likely is because they can package deal the early access to the allied race as a pre-order for the expansion, something they have done so before with BFA. Imagine the cover art for Midnight, having the Ethereals there and Xal'atath. Maybe they won't use her since we had her already on this expansion's art cover, but possibly Dimensius or a Void Lord of some sorts. That would sell better than kidneys. So now that we 100% confirmed that Ethereals will be playable in Midnight, what classes should they have? Obviously, if the devs decide on it, they can just be everything, but that's boring. The first that always comes to mind are rogues and mages. Pretty much most Ethereals we encountered were either stealing artifacts in some way or using arcane and void magic to do gnarly stuff. As long as we know what kind of a race they are, we can probably assume that anything that has to do with a lot of physicality will normally be out of the question, which rules out the plate classes, monks, and I'm debating hunters. To be fair, hunters could be fine. There are those phase hunter beasts in Terracar that used to blink, if I recall, and would make sense for them to be their pets alongside any exotic beasts within their vast collections. We do have more freedom when it comes to the magic classes. With mage out of the way, the next most obvious ones are warlock and priest. Once upon a time, void was part of warlock fantasy since they can literally summon a void walker. But also before the lore of Void Lords was fully written, they had a glyph for the Void Walker to turn it into a Void Lord. Obviously, that makes no sense today, but the connection is confirmed at least. Priest for obvious reasons though, cause shadow. But would be an interesting development if they can argue holy in any way. Maybe part of their culture before they got destroyed by Dimensius was part of a priest culture that venerated the light in some way. I would probably rule out shaman and druid due to their super chaotic and unnatural nature. It's also difficult to make them demon hunters, considering the demon hunter lore is individuals eating the heart of a demon they subdued that infuses their body with fel and turns their existence into a constant internal battle with said demon to prevent it to not take over. Given the lack of a stomach, or any digestive system for that matter, not to mention an actual body, Ethereals would be hard-pressed to partake in the demonic ritual. But this leaves us with an opportunity for a new class entirely. Well, two actually that come to mind. That would fit perfectly with Ethereals, and imagine the shake-up for a WoW expansion to come with two new classes in an age where it's been alive for 21 years at that time. The first would be the Technomancer. Technomancy is basically their magic system where they combine arcane with technology to control it and create stuff. And this wouldn't be the first new race with a new class that's just available to them to be released. Thank you, Dragonflight. Given their proclivity to acquire artifacts irrespective of the owner's free will, the toys and possibilities are vast. Maybe Technomancer wouldn't have enough juice to be a full class and could be a spec of something very similar, which is the Tinker, a class we have discussed ad nauseum on our channel, which would also fit with the story we had in Undermine. The second class would be actually the cooler one, and I'm not settled on a name. It could be anything between Mage Hunter, Spellbreaker, or Mana Stealer. Aspects of these already exist into WoW, and with Illidan's mana burn in Warcraft 3, Blood Elf's Spellbreaker and mana manipulation spells in the same game, and aspects of Ethereals as a culture of hunters and arcane manipulators, this could fit so well. And it could be the male class we always wanted. I can definitely see it have a tanking spec as well, an actual tank that deals with mana deliberately as part of its design. Maybe you have a better idea, which you can shove into the comment section, and also watch our video on the 10 races WoW desperately needs right here. Spoilers, Ethereals are also there.